maxed out the cloud with our long-windedness.
The cloud is maxed out right now. Yeah. Okay. Where do we want to start, Zoe?
Yeah, I guess I think the first one's a really great one for you to answer is, what should athletes do when they're feeling sick? This is something also that we've seen a lot. There's a lot of it's just kind of that time of year. Also, just as like a word of caution, we have had several athletes diagnosed with COVID. Luckily, no one seriously. But just, be extra cautious and take care of yourselves out there. It's a pretty, an endurance athlete should do everything possible to avoid a severe respiratory infection.
Yes. So with that in mind, for any athletes out there,
we're going to talk about what to do while you're sick, and this is non-COVID sickness, because
yes,
if you have COVID, you should really stay home in accordance with CDC guidelines.
Well, yeah. Not only that, I know we have a number of, I think I'm coaching at least 5 people with COVID right now. So obviously the pandemic is very much a real thing at the moment, even if some people feel like they might be well isolated from it in their communities. I do want to say that we should all be working together to take this thing really seriously. It could be a very challenging winter in that respect. And so, because there's not a lot of information on exactly what happens to athletes when they get sick with the coronavirus, some people recover and do fine. Others, they actually have kind of long-term symptoms that are most likely a result of having respiratory issue from the virus. We are very, very, very cautious about this with the athletes. I know Zoe didn't, our question about running when you're sick isn't supposed to be geared to COVID, but the last couple of days, at least with my roster, I have seen a number of positive COVID test results. So I think it's actually a pretty good topic to start with. Which kind of leads me to this respiratory thing and like how we differentiate between like not feeling good and being sick and needing to rest. The general rule of thumb is that if you have any symptoms below the neck, don't run. What are symptoms below the neck? Coughing is a symptom below the neck. Body aches are a symptom below the neck. Also symptoms of COVID, but can be symptoms of a cold or just being sick. It's winter, at least where we are, hence the hat. It's very cold in the house this morning and my hair is crazy. But take this stuff seriously. There can be lasting effects from running when sick, especially from running when you have the coronavirus. We do want you guys to understand that training, especially as your volume increases in your training block, you're building towards a race, really suppresses the immune system. So you could be more susceptible to getting a sniffle, to getting a little bit of a sore throat or a cough. So I would recommend, really watching out for those things and taking that stuff seriously. So if you're running when you're sick and you're suppressing your immune system, which obviously is already a little bit suppressed, and maybe having an inflammatory response in response to a cold, a virus, something like that, you're going to make it a lot more difficult to recover. You're going to make the process days longer. So we like to get ahead of this stuff as quickly as you can. Honestly, a lot of athletes who've been training with us for 6 months, a year, you start to notice the patterns. Your awareness changes and you can start to get a little bit ahead of like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit weird. That normally kind of like is that pattern where like 2 days later I'm going to feel sick. So taking an early rest day sometimes can help.
Or dropping strides, dropping a workout, not instead of doing like a 10-mile run when it's 30 degrees outside, maybe just going for a 40-minute jog, wearing a few extra layers and slowing down on purpose, things like that. Like if you're feeling like one of those, like maybe I'm about to catch something kind of days, that's not the day to go out and like try to PR your 10K. because the more intensity that you have, the more you're going to stress your system, which makes it less capable of fighting things off. So, just always approach this through the framework of like, how does what I do today affect what I'm able to do, 2 weeks from now and like 3 to 5 years from now? Like that's our framework for consistency. Like, yes, consistency does mean getting out there as many days as possible. But if taking a rest day now means that you're going to come back, and be able to run stronger 2 weeks from now, then like definitely take that rest day.
I would agree. Yeah, absolutely.
And then to piggyback off that, let's say an athlete does take a rest day. Should they make up those miles?
I generally don't have athletes do makeup miles. I think that over stressing the importance of a specific amount of miles per week can sometimes be counterintuitive. I think especially to be quite fair, the data of this community suggests that the majority of athletes are externally motivated and data motivated. So in order to help you guys stay process oriented, sometimes it makes sense to take away, or not take away, but to reduce the emphasis around like the importance of X number of miles every week. Because if we make those miles up every single time, one, we might not be listening to our bodies when we really did need that rest. And then that rest usually helps us to have a better session the next time we get out. So
quality over quantity.
Yep. That's a huge pillar of kind of our philosophy for sure.
I also like to frame it in terms of like, we have rest days for a reason. Rest days aren't like, it's not on your bingo card. It's not the free space. Rest days are a part of your training. A rest day is as important as your long run. I would rather an athlete miss their long run than their rest day. And if you end up running on your rest day, you're not getting in extra miles, you're getting in less rest. And if you're not getting adequate rest, then you're not getting the adaptations that you are trying to provoke through training, right? It's like training is knocking down your house and rest is when you build it back. If you don't rest, then you're just constantly tearing something down and then you're not allowing that building to occur. So we really need to reframe how intentional we are about rest days. Like a rest day is as important, if not more important than a workout. I would always rather athletes miss a run than a rest day. And if you run on a rest day, then you are taking that opportunity to adapt to training stimulus away.
Are you talking about this, Zoe, in the context of like, I was sick on Tuesday, so I rested. Then I felt better. I ran Wednesday and Thursday, and I want to make up Tuesday's miles on Friday? Or are you thinking about this in the context of like, sneaking in an extra run on Friday when it's your kind of second rest day of the week?
Either way, we do have some athletes run on Friday in order to achieve the volume that works for them. It's more about like, once again, getting away from that mindset where you view training like filling a bucket and you're like, I just have to get these miles in. Instead, we want to conceptualize of training like building a wall. And each thing that you do is an important brick in that wall. Rest is a brick, a workout is a brick, a long run is a brick. And if you're taking out your rest day bricks, like that's the foundation of your training. And you just like, you have to have that mix, and it's not just about getting the miles in, because if you're over stressing, like achieving that perfect volume, then a lot of times you're going to be overemphasizing quantity over quality. And if you get extra rest, that might mean that your quality is going to be much better, which is what we're always looking for. And once again, like the best training that you can do today is what's going to allow you to train stronger 3-5 years from now. Like there's nothing that anyone can do today that legitimately makes a difference except rest. Like that is the only in the moment choice you can make for your training that like really produces positive, like a one-time positive impact.
I'm going to have my own question for you or for us. When we're thinking about rest and we're thinking about weekly mileage, I think this is something that comes up with athletes. How do you view periodizing training in terms of week by week, and then over the course of a year?
It depends on the athlete's background and goals. There's some athletes that I train, if they are doing, I mean, it just totally depends. For some people, I conceptualize of training in terms of time. For some, it's mileage.
Let's not think about time or mileage. Let's think about the layout of the week. If Monday is a rest day, that's periodization. If Tuesday is an easy day, that's periodization compared to a workout.
I don't understand the question.
How are you periodizing things in order to allow athletes to have some flexibility with that extra rest, I guess is what I'm asking. Like, how aren't we?
I feel like you want to say something and you're trying to get me to say it, and I don't know what it is.
That's fine. For our athletes, we take into account the fact that you guys are going to have life is going to happen, and you're going to have rest days that maybe aren't necessarily scheduled in. This is part of training. This is why there's an off season for almost every athlete. This is why some athletes take a longer off season than others. This is why, you don't run workouts every single day. You're running them a few times a week. I think there's some general misconceptions around periodization.
Maybe you can define that for people who don't understand it in the way that you do.
Well, the way that periodization is actually defined is
easy days are easy, hard days are hard.
Exactly. And rest days are rest days.
Okay.
And then over the course of a calendar year, you're going to have weeks that are more stressful than other weeks. That's periodization as well, right? So in less stressful weeks, your body is actually having the opportunity to adapt. So adaptation can happen on days when you're running really easy too, because there's less stress than on that workout day.
Absolutely. Total adaptation easy miles are fundamental for, Basically, we want people to move away from viewing training as like, this like black and white, like you get the miles in or you didn't, right? Like we want to move away from like beating yourself up because you miss a day, or like running miles like as a form of punishment because you didn't squeeze it in the day before. We also want people to not just feel like they can switch things around all the time, because we do put a lot of intent into training logs. Each athlete's plan is built by us, by hand. It takes a very long time and is very intentional. And you can't just flip things around. Like we put things where they are for a certain reason, right? Like we want you to go into your long run with a certain specific amount of fatigue. We want you to go into your workout with a certain specific amount of fatigue. And if you're just like, well, I'm feeling tired, so I'll do my workout Thursday instead of Wednesday. Like, well, then you're actually you're fundamentally changing the training stimulus. And so we want people to stick to the schedule as closely as possible, not because we're like lame sticklers, but because like there is intent there. And there can be times where like we can flop like a Saturday, Sunday run and like maybe intentionally go into the long run with a little extra fatigue. But like even then, you're trading off this like potential injury risk, potential for like undermining aerobic development, potentially overemphasizing fatigue resistance. And so we just don't want people to feel like, oh, it doesn't matter when I do what, because it does matter. And that's why you have a coach, basically. So like, don't run miles to like punish yourself. Don't, not all miles are created equal. It matters when you do your miles, and it matters how you do them and how fatigued you are and what you did the day before and what you're going to do the next day. So, just approach your training with intention. And if you miss a day, that's fine. Like we all miss days, right?
Yeah.
And we just want to move away from being like, oh, I can just always make it up. Because if you go in with that mindset, we see people who allow themselves to do makeup miles. Those end up being people that run less overall.
Because they get into a consistent habit of switching their schedule and trying to make up the miles later. And it always leads to to training
to less rest and less total mileage, which is the least desirable outcome. Awesome.
Well, I think we hit that full of topic.
Yeah.
That was good. I think that, you guys, this is really important getting into winter too. If you start to allow yourself, hey, it was snowing, so I didn't go out there. Oh, it was drizzling, I didn't go out there. It just becomes habit to not go out. And then all of a sudden you're 10 weeks from your 100 miler or your 10K and you haven't done most of your training. We see it all the time. That is a big reason why some people come to Microcosm and want coaching, because they've had, issues with that. So hold yourselves accountable, use your coaches, use your running communities, get out there on group runs, bundle up. Mm-hmm. We all do it. It's good for you.
You can have discipline and you can still forgive yourself when it doesn't happen.
Yeah, but just try, I guess the point is just try to not make that habitual.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone misses days, but we control how many.
Cool. So here's a question that we get a lot, actually. Should I organize my training around my menstrual cycle? I'm going to let Zoe answer that.
That would be so fun to watch you answer. So this is something I've done a bit of research on, and I will say that there is not a lot of evidence either way, because women are severely understudied in all kinds of, in every realm. Literally, actually, fun fact, there are no female crash test dummies. If you're a woman with breasts who's ever worn a seatbelt, that's going to resonate with you. But there's so little science, particularly sports science, performed on women, that really any conclusion drawn from it, I think, would be inherently flawed, just because there's not a ton of evidence either way. However, I would say that essentially what it boils down to is there are going to be times during your menstrual cycle where you're going to feel better and times when you're going to feel worse, which is going to sound like very euphemistic and broad strokes to anyone who's ever menstruated. But some days are totally great and you might have a little extra energy depending on where you are in your cycle, and some days are going to feel really not great. I try to move athletes away from overemphasizing where they are at any point in their cycle, because especially if you're competing, you can't plan your race schedule around your menstrual cycle. If you do, that's really next level. I think that it's important for athletes to learn how to perform not just on their best day, but also on the days where like maybe you don't feel amazing. And so, yeah, I think it's just all about embracing how you feel. And of course, if you're having symptoms that feel like, if you're having extreme cramping, pain, bloating, like things that like really interfere with your training, then like, yes, of course you can adapt. Like, don't force a workout if you're in a lot of pain or if you feel extremely fatigued. Like, those are decisions that are always okay to make with your coach. Like, hey, I was, really not feeling great today, had a lot of cramps, a lot of bloating. It would have undermined the quality of the workout for me to try to go out there today. And that's always a great time to rest. However, once again, if your 50K falls on that day in your cycle, then sometimes you can benefit from learning how to be like, okay, how do I, learn how to work through this? So, once again, like there are some people that promote the idea of organizing your training around where you are in your cycle. I don't personally see that it's that beneficial, particularly just because you can't control when you're going to compete. And I think that the benefits of just learning to work through some of the harder parts outweigh, any potential like very marginal gains from like, oh yeah, I'm at like this part in my cycle, so I'm really going to crush this workout. I think a lot of times it can almost be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you're like, oh, I'm at this point in my menstrual cycle, then I'm really going to be strong today. Like, the stories we tell ourselves are very, very powerful. And that's not to say that, the biology of how menstrual cycles affect you isn't real. It is, but so are the narratives we tell ourselves. And we have to kind of balance those two things, and just always, show ourselves extra compassion, but also not undermine ourselves as athletes by limiting ourselves and saying, I can only compete and I can only perform at these points in my cycle.
Yeah, I don't think that you want to self-limit yourself that way, because there are too many ways to self-limit when it comes to all of the variables that can affect your race and your race performance.
Yeah.
So try to reinforce the
but once
positives
again,
behind that.
If you're experiencing severe symptoms, like, have compassion for yourself and feel free to not, push through pain, obviously.
Absolutely not. Would you have an athlete make up miles if they were to take a day off because of discomfort?
I wouldn't. I would just say, like, if, seems like you need a little extra rest this week, let's embrace that and then have higher quality miles next week, rather than potentially digging ourselves in a fatigue hole that we have a hard time getting out of. There could be, like, if there was, and like, this is something that if I have warning that an athlete is like either maybe going to be at a challenging point in their cycle, or like they let me know about a schedule conflict ahead of time, I can rearrange their schedule to be like, okay, well, if we're not going to do the workout on Wednesday, maybe we can do it on Thursday and do something else on Wednesday. And I can rearrange the entire week to reflect that. What we don't want is athletes taking, just hijacking their training and essentially doing whatever they want, whenever they want, with no consideration as to, stress distribution. Like, our jobs are stress distributors. Like, we are experts at distributing stress. And so lean on us when you need help distributing stress.
Oh man, I want to go back into the talk about periodization and rest is, but I
think we hit that pretty hard.
I'll keep going forward. Great. Yes, I agree. I don't generally, any of my female athletes, I try not to organize the training around the particular highs and lows of the cycle, but more try to be reactive when people are feeling discomfort.
There's just not sufficient evidence to suggest that it meaningfully impacts most people's performance. And also, we just need better science with women. We need, please, more science. Please let women be considered people. Would be so great.
You're considered a person in this community.
Yes, but not everywhere. Scientifically. Like, most studies actually disclude women because of the menstrual cycle, because they see that kind of hormonal fluctuation as being like not helpful for the scientific. I know this is something Kylie's been doing a bunch of research for Trail Runner about women's specific nutrition, and has run into just such a profound, and like, this is in nutrition, like such a profound lack of female specific research.
I think we should do something about that.
Yeah, there's actually a really great book coming out about it by one of the columnists for Outside Magazine, Christine Yu, that I'm really looking forward to.
Cool. Yeah, share that with the group.
Yeah, and I'm super excited. Yes, so Suzanne Klaus mentioned Stacy Sims. She is great. I, however, do have some pushback against some of the arguments I feel that she extrapolates from small amounts of research. I think her research is probably pretty good. However, I think that anytime you have a study that only has 6 people in it, like, that to me is not
kind of small,
crazy compelling. And I think that sometimes she draws really big conclusions from really small sample sizes. That is just my I enjoy reading her writing. I think there are some helpful takeaways from it. I do, however, as someone trained in science communication, see some flaws in her process that make me unlikely to lean too heavily on some of the conclusions she draws. But I could be wrong.
Okay. No, it's definitely a bit biased, so I'm just going to add that.
Her research?
Yes, some of the stuff that she promotes is a little bit biased. Yeah. So just do your own homework too don't take everything she says for face value. But I think that what she does talk about is very important, and there are some things that she mentions that do have more research behind them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, true. Maybe not quite enough to fill the book that she set out to write, but once again, like, she is an expert in her field. She knows what she's doing. However, I do feel like some of the conclusions that maybe she was forced to draw in order to just like fill up the book or whatever, feel a bit shaky to me. And once again, like, Kylie is an expert in this field as well. Also a woman who does sports, and, it's just kind of, it's hard. We just don't have the research either way. Honestly, it's mostly due to a lack of people feeling comfortable or feeling motivated to research females, and to specifically research female athletes. One of my favorite soapboxes.
I'm looking forward to seeing some of the compelling research from that. So feel free to share with me, guys. Thanks. So let's segue to cross training. We have a few questions on this. Thank you for sending these questions in. What is the best way to do double workouts? How much time should we take in between? And should we be considering specifically fueling for the second workout and or recovery on the first workout?
So I would definitely say there's no like hard and fast rule for you need this many hours between workouts. I think it's by feel. Like, if you feel recovered, then it's okay to do a secondary workout. I'm thinking of this in terms of like, one of your workouts is some form of cross training, swimming, biking, skiing, and the other one is a run. I would say whenever it feels like your heart rate has returned to kind of base, but I would also definitely emphasize getting in preferably a meal, but definitely some fueling in between. Don't do 2 workouts back to back without fueling like a total boss. Like if you're going to be a multi-sport athlete, you better eat like you're doing 2 sports, like 2 people, like you're eating for 2 sports. So do that. Don't do your run and then have like a graham cracker and hop on the bike. Like if you're not properly fueled, then you're just undermining the entire intent of getting on the bike or going out for your run or your ski or whatever it is.
And I think in talking about fueling, guys, Kylie gave a really great talk on this topic a few weeks ago, available in the YouTube channel. Kind of the way that I advise athletes on this, because I do have a number of athletes who are prescribed optional doubles, especially for people who are doing a very low volume of running or coming back from injury and need extra aerobic stimulus. A really good way to do that is to get on a trainer or to go out for a longer bike ride in the afternoon. I think about setting up the cross training element to this, or the double workout. We have very few athletes who do double runs, but some do. And this definitely, I think the same rule kind of applies. Schedule the run into your day and the double workout in a place that makes intuitive sense with your schedule, right? Like almost every single person here works something like a 9 to 5 or 8 to 6. So if you do a run in the morning and then you do a run or a bike in the evening to bookend your training, that's a great way to set up the day. I like that too, because it gives you time, because after the run, you need to eat. If we refer back to the conversation with Kylie, she very specifically kind of outlines this for us, but you need to have protein and carbohydrates going into the system. And depending on how much you eat, which should be sufficient, I would think, I don't want to put a calorie number on it, but we have mentioned before that before long runs, maybe you need to be eating 500 to 700 calories and you need 2 hours to digest. So having that bigger window, some people are more comfortable running without fully digesting. Like I don't wait 2 hours. I've never had an issue, but some people might want 2 hours. But I think you definitely, if you're considering how to time these things, it's having the time to eat all that you need to replenish from that workout and to fuel, particularly carbohydrates, to fuel the next workout and to be able to digest that. So for a lot of people, that looks like doing the run sometime in the morning and 2 hours or more, maybe later, doing the next workout. And if you are stretching that farther, so say like you're kind of like Zoe and you do your run at 10 in the morning and then you do your hour on the bike at 4:30, you probably need to have a snack before that bike ride, because lunch isn't necessarily going to carry you over as somebody who's a highly trained athlete and needs all those calories. It's probably not going to carry you over into the workout. So you might need a light snack like an hour or 30 minutes before that workout to get enough into it. That's how I think about the cross training element. I really think about it, especially for myself when I'm doing doubles, is making sure I have time to eat and then to digest. Kylie, did you want to add something specifically? Because I know I mentioned your name in there in our conversation.
Not really. I do think that it's important. You kind of touched on it, that if you aren't doing something like that already, that you kind of want to build up to it. I wouldn't necessarily say to go from like eating half a banana to eating like 700 calories before you do a long run. So if you are doing that, I think that's important to just build yourself up to it. And then being kind of making sure you're being intentional with the choices that you're making too, because I think that you want to make sure you're not just having some big breakfast of like, 3 fried eggs and bacon and all this stuff with a lot of fat before you go running that might upset your stomach. So just making sure that those bases are covered. But I think that's something that a lot of athletes that I work with, they don't work on that before a long run. And it is something that I say, if there's any day of the week that you really need to work on that pre-run fueling, it's going to be that long run day. So I would make that a priority to kind of get into a pattern or schedule to kind of practice that what you might use on race day morning.
Great. Yeah. And I know that you really went in depth on this. So guys, if you aren't familiar, if you have questions, please watch or listen to the resource Kylie gave a rapid fire Friday on this about a month ago, and it's great.
And she also had, I know because I saved it on my phone because I thought it was so good. She had a guide to like eating and snacking for runners who are doing twice a day workouts. I think it was actually for triathletes because Kylie works with a lot of triathletes, but I found that really, really useful in terms of like guiding how much, like if you're doing 2 workouts a day, you've got to just eat like a freaking champ. And Kylie's comes with a lot of like really nice suggestions on not only when, but like what are nice, like here's a great lunch idea, here's a good snack idea, here's some like kind of ways to think about how you time it. But I think, another thing to just mention about doing doubles is that those, we want to think about stress concentration, but we also want to think about what we're doing and not letting it undermine really key days. So like I steer athletes away from doing doubles before workouts. So like if your workout is on a Wednesday, then like Tuesday, let's not do a double. Don't do a double before a long run either.
And by double, do you mean like even a recovery ride on the bike, or are you talking about like a ride with intervals and pretty intense training?
In terms of that, it depends on how the athlete responds to doubles. But I would definitely not recommend doing a bike workout before your workout. Once again, in terms of stress concentration, I think depending on the athlete's, once again, background, goals, and how they individually respond, they could do a recovery ride or like a gentle kind of aerobic bike, swim, ski, whatever it is, before a workout. But I think most athletes, I would steer them away from that unless specifically in their training we've seen it be beneficial and never contributing to excessive fatigue or reduced output on workouts.
And by before, you mean the day before. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I think this kind of leads me to another question that we had on this, which is a really great question. Is it okay to do our runs or our bikes within a 12-hour period or so of each other?
Like, I mean, if you're doubling, yes, because otherwise...
I think this question means like day to day, right? Yeah. So like if we did the morning run and then
once
we
again,
did an evening run
and then
the next day.
Yeah, I would say it's not about like, oh, you need to get at least 12 hours recovery. It's how you feel. And then again, like, let's say you're trying to do a bike on Tuesday night and then you have to get up early to get your workout in before work. I would say then maybe that bike ride is a lot less important and you should emphasize recovery during that time period rather than potentially sacrifice the quality of your workout.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I think it's also
But there's no like time window. It's all about how you feel.
Totally. And I think it's also important to adjust your expectations. If you are a really busy person and the way that you have compartmentalized or found space in your day for a run is one day of the week, it's at 6 p.m. And the next day, because you looked at your schedule and you saw when your meetings are and when you're committed time-wise. And the next day, you can only run at 6 a.m. Adjust your expectations for how that run might feel. Because if you've only got that many hours to recover, and maybe that run at 6 p.m. was your Wednesday workout and you're tired, you need to adjust the way you feel. And I think something that Zoe and I talk about a lot and try to emphasize with you guys is when you're not feeling your best and when you're feeling a little tired or you're feeling sore, that is the moment to respond by going even easier, adjusting that expectation, not thinking about your output level. So not looking at your watch and seeing what your splits are, just saying, I'm going to run for this amount of miles and I'm really going to own my easy effort, or maybe take it down a few notches and like go recover it and make it like close to a walk or a shuffle.
Yeah. If you ever look at your watch and see, oh, that looks slow, I should speed up, that is the wrong choice to make.
Yeah. Oh man. We emphasize this a lot. At least I do. You can almost not run too slow.
As long as you're technically
really
running.
You can't.
You're moving forward.
Yeah. So keep that in mind when you have, we're all forced at one time or another to do runs pretty close together, and it might not be ideal. So when you know that those things are happening, focus on kicking those feet up like after the run, making sure that you've got plenty of fuel and adjusting your expectation for the next day and being like, hey, I might be a little more sore because I didn't have that 20-hour recovery period or 24 hours, because my schedule, it sometimes changes and I have to be flexible. I have to be open to that in order to get my training in. And that means not every day I'm going to feel 100%. And that's part of the process and totally, totally normal.
Yeah. I also think it's important not to overemphasize cross training. Yeah. Like, very rarely is a breakthrough in your fitness or training going to be because of like what you do on skis or the bike or swimming or whatever. It can definitely be helpful, and there is a time and a place for it. But if you're a highly motivated athlete, just be very gentle with yourself and be very deliberate in your cross training, because just going ham all the time at like 10 different sports is just going to make you tired, and that's not very efficient running training.
Yeah. And if you're tired, your running economy suffers. And that's a big thing that we're trying to develop.
Don't undermine your training with cross training. It can be a fine line, and it, sometimes requires a little bit of experimentation, but it's all about balance.
So our last cross training question is, I think, a really good one and an interesting one for me to answer. Is there a way to translate bike workouts or stationary road biking workouts to mountain biking? Zoe, do you want to start with your answer, or should I answer this one?
It totally depends on the type of mountain biking you're doing, but I would just say doing more sustained climbs. It's like all about, it's a lot about power output. I'm not a huge mountain biker. I used to, and I cracked my skull and I'm not as into it, but they don't translate crazy amazing, that fitness does, but I would say, doing longer sustained climbs can be very helpful. But, it's really hard to mimic, like you can't develop great mountain bike handling skills in your garage. It's just not going to happen. You can develop like better aerobic fitness, and you can develop like a pretty good power output, but so much of mountain biking isn't just biking. It's not just power output, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the difference between running on a track and running up a 14er, right? Like, sure, they're both running, but there's a lot more going on when you're on varied terrain, and it's a highly dependent question.
I think for me, yes, you can translate some bike workouts to mountain biking, but there's always going to be a loss of aerobic stimulus when you're on the downhill. Because you're pumping and pedaling maybe a little bit, but it's not the same as a sustained effort, like you mentioned. So I think for athletes who want to get cross training in and have a focused element to that, you have to allot and make space for that before, maybe on the climb or in a flat section of trail, you can do your intervals, and then you can kind of go out there and flow. I think about mountain biking and sometimes skiing in the same regard. Like, we're not necessarily out there to build a ton of fitness. We're out there more for like, it's fun. We need the mental and emotional break from sometimes the grind of running and nose training. And that can be very beneficial in a cross training way. So building that into a week, in the afternoons or something for athletes after an easy run or whatnot can be a really good idea. You don't have to bring a specific training stimulus and focus to everything. I think
it's okay to not make everything be cross training.
Yeah.
Like when I ski, I'm not like, oh yeah, what great cross training. I'm just like, skiing is fun and I like doing things that aren't running because I'm a person, And I think it's okay to not be like, I'm only going to do activities that are good cross training. Like if you love mountain biking, like heck yeah, get out there and mountain bike, Don't always be obsessed with like, how does this help my training? I think it's important to be like, will this hurt my training? Like I wouldn't go do a giant mountain bike the night before your workout, get tired, get hurt, get sore, and undermine your training. But I think it's okay for not everything. I don't think it's okay. It is absolutely okay for you to do things that aren't absolutely productive for your training. Like that's part of what being a person is like, and all of that is wonderful. And I think it can be very helpful, particularly if it gives you mental and emotional space away from training. Like for me, when there have been times in my training life when I've maybe been too dependent or emotionally attached to my like data, switching to skiing, which is something that I'm an absolute beginner at, where I have like zero meaningful metrics to track because I am pretty bad at it, was like really helpful for me, because it helped me just re-engage in the process and detach from the outcome, because that's like kind of the beginner's mindset. So if like finding physical activity, like hiking. Like if you're hiking, like don't put that on Strava, just enjoy being out there with your family, right? Like mountain bike, like for joy, ski for joy. Like not everything has to be all about training, but you know, at a certain point, like particularly if you have like very ambitious goals on the schedule, then like maybe don't run away with the joy of mountain biking or skiing when you have, you know, like a 100 coming up.
Yeah. And I think it's important to understand the context maybe in which you're talking about, like embracing some skiing, you know, that might be like on a Friday afternoon or a Sunday after you've done your run.
Correct.
As like a mental break.
I mean, once again, I would never say, I mean, if you want to take like a couple weekends off here and there, depending on your background and goals to engage in those activities, great. But like, we really try to steer athletes away from being like, oh, it's ski season, I'm going to ski every weekend and absolutely expect to still have the same result at my 100-mile race in April. No.
Yeah. I mean,
you know, like you have to make decisions and you have to prioritize things. And that's something that you need to think about when you're choosing your goals. Like if you want to go and ski and mountain bike instead of running at points, then do not put a 100K on your schedule. Do not put a 100 on your schedule, depending on your background and goals. But I think it's just, you know, it's all about balance.
Yeah, I want to also shout out, Kristen mentioned Zwift, which is a really awesome training resource. I know that for a lot of my athletes who live in really cold areas, Canada and things like that, we reduce a lot of mileage during the winter, and having something that they can put on in their garage is really helpful. And there's a lot of good like mental stimulation from being able to get out on like the different courses and stuff like that. So if that's something that interests you guys, Kristen she works with Zwift. So I'm sure she can answer any specific Zwift questions, but it's good to have those resources because it's sometimes not that fun to go and do your cross training and just kind of stare at a wall the whole time for an hour, or your garage door, which is what Zoe does.
I'm getting purple lights to put up though, so it feels more fun.
That's so funny. That's awesome. All right. Great. We're really cruising through this. I think we're going to be,
if
you guys have follow-up questions, let us know.
You have a question here that is totally illegible to me.
Okay. That's why I'm reading the questions, because I wrote them on the page.
Neither of us can read the other's handwriting, which is, I think, very healthy.
Okay. All right. I don't know what to say to that. How do I work out with others when I have a plan that doesn't necessarily account for the routes that friends want to do? How do I incorporate my runs into like running with my community and my group?
Yeah. This is tough. You know, I think like easy days are great to do with friends. Like that's a great way to stay conversational, make sure things are easy. And I think that's great. I think that if you're constantly sacrificing your workouts to be with other people, that can be a problem. It is okay for you to own your training. It is okay to tell people like, hey, I do want to run with you, but it doesn't really work for me to run on Wednesdays because that's my workout day. How about Thursday? Or how about we grab a long run together? That's like setting boundaries and defining what you want in training is so, so amazing and important. And if your friends want to run with you, like they'll understand, but it does not benefit you in every way to always be the person compromising. Like if you have friends that aren't necessarily training in a very specific way and they're not working with coaches, if you're the person who's always sacrificing your workout or your strides or your long run to meet them, then like you're leaving a lot on the table, and then you're not getting the full benefit of like this community, the service that you're paying for. And I think that, you know, like instead of you compromising to like drop your strides or drop a workout or whatever, dude, recruit your friends to do what you want to do. Like see if they want to come along for the ride and if they have potentially an interest in pursuing more specific training. Obviously we don't want you to like never run with friends again, like always buckle down and train as hard as you can, like alone forever in the long dark winter. Like that's not what we want. We want you to have fun, but we don't want you to sacrifice training specificity too. So, you know, if you're doing a run, like maybe on the day that you have hills or strides, do those at the end, or like tell your friend like, hey, I'm going to go do a couple strides. I'll jog back and meet you. Or I'm going to go do a tempo in the middle of this long run, but I'll TJ and I do that all the time because he does more tempos in his long runs. So he'll tempo ahead and then he'll jog back to meet me on the trail. Like there are ways to meet in the middle, but I would never suggest TJ drop a tempo to run with me. And he would not drop a tempo to run with me.
Certainly not.
Likely.
I think
encourage your friends to be curious about what you're doing.
Yes.
Rather than like, I remember before I was able, and this is like, you know, a constant struggle of like owning my athleticism. I would, instead of like, I didn't want to be that person that was like, oh, I have strides or, oh, I have a workout. And so I used to not advocate for myself in the same way. And I think a big part of owning yourself as an athlete is saying like, you know what, like I got big goals, I've got big plans, and I'm not going to sacrifice four of my strides for, you know, just to run with someone. Cause like you can always, you know, you can once again, go back and meet them, have them do it with you. But we also kind of, for most people, try to steer them away from planning their whole week around a group run. There's sometimes when it can be really beneficial, or like there's sometimes when it can maybe work out. But like if you're planning your entire training around how to run with others, then I think, you know, it can be worth investigating if we need to like reprioritize like what your true goals are, because a lot of people do come into the sport for community, and that's great. And we never want to undermine that. However, if you're prioritizing hanging out with people in a way that is detrimental to you getting healthy and happy to the start line of a race, then I think it can be worth investigating what's going on there.
Yeah, great answer. I think the short answer for me is that most of your runs, 80 to 90%, are done at an easy effort. Group runs should be done at an easy effort, or there's no point in running with the group. It's supposed to be conversational, or else there's no social element to it other than that.
TJ and I are frequently the slowest people
close.
at group runs.
Yeah, I mean, I run in the back when we used to do group runs in Carbondale.
Back when, in the before times.
Own your training. So if you want to run easy, that's great. Everyone else should be running easy too, because it's a group run. Recruit your friends to do the hill work with you, do the strides with you. It'll only benefit them. Feel free to explain to them why you're doing it. You know, that ripple effect is powerful. When you're training for a big goal and you own it and you talk to people about it, you're reinforcing to yourself the importance of that goal, and you're making it more real for you. That's huge.
And you get to be like the nexus of a culture of excellence when you do stuff like that. When you say, this is what matters to me and I'm going to freaking chase it, you know, like you can either get on board or you can watch me, you know, walk away. Like own that you can be the start of your own culture of excellence. And
that can happen. You can run a group run basically any day of the week. It just depends on whether or not you know, you're down to run 3 miles of that group run with somebody because you need to go off and do your intervals for 20 minutes. And I think owning that and not using the group run as an excuse to not do the work is huge. I've seen it time and time again with athletes who want to go run with somebody and that person decides they want to do a hike instead. And so they skip their entire run. And that, you know, is not going to be met with a positive response from me. It's going to be met with, you need to own your training. That you could have run before and then done the hike as a cool down. You guys, it's super important, and it's very easy to do these group runs because most of our miles are easy. Group runs should be easy so we can talk to each other and be social.
And that makes it even more important that you don't sell yourself short on workouts and strides, right? Because we do so few of them in a week that if you do a group run on Tuesday and because you're so excited to get a beer afterward that you drop your strides, like that's a significant portion of your weekly intensity that you're dropping, because there's so little of it that if you're dropping, you know, 4 20-second strides, that could be like 40% of your total intensity for the week, depending on what your schedule looks like.
It makes a difference. Recruit your people.
Yeah.
Have them do it with you.
Yeah.
It's fun to run strides with people. That little bit of competitiveness can help you kind of like break through on those output levels.
That's one of the reasons why I got very curious about training, is because like early on when we were getting to know each other, we would go on runs and TJ would be like, well, I'm going to go do my hills now. You can join or you can sit here and watch. And I would be like, well, I'm definitely not going to sit there, you know? And so like, I got curious about the benefits of specific training. I got curious about hill intervals. You know, I got curious about like what it would mean for my training if I prioritized what I wanted rather than like, you know, the most efficient way to meet people, I guess.
Yeah.
Which was hard when I was in a new place, but you know, I think it's okay to advocate for yourself and own your training, and people are going to respect you for that, and they'll be curious.
Yeah. And when you're kind of in unfamiliar terrain, if you're meeting a friend at a new trail or something, know that the trail doesn't matter as much as running easy matters, and getting the strides in and the work that's prescribed matters. So give yourself some flexibility, I think, when it comes to terrain and routes. Obviously, you know, the gentler the terrain on workouts, the better, because we can kind of remove some of the variables that might inhibit economic development via like technical trails with a lot of like up and down. So try to get your friends, if you're going to go do a group run on a day where you know you're doing a longer workout, try to get your friends to go to an easier trail that facilitates the workout that you're doing. Owning this stuff and advocating for yourself is huge. This is something that everybody struggles with in one area or another.
I know we've both talked about,
you know,
the difficulty in navigating the fact that like we want to be friends with like amazing athletes, and that necessarily means that we all have different goals and different training at times. And so it's about, you know, just having baller text threads where I'm like, all right, you know, here are my goals. Here's what's going to fit into my training schedule. How does this overlap with you? Like, where can we find that overlap, rather than, you know, making it too much of a push and pull. Or even like, you know, I'm not going to cave to people and do something I don't want to do. Like I spent so much of my life being like, whatever, I'll just do whatever run my friends want to do. And then when I actually was like, oh, what am I curious about? Like, okay, I want to freaking run up 14ers, or like, I want to not power hike for 90% of the run, you know, like finding what I was excited about and then like just advocating for that and you know.
This summer, you've had to work really hard to advocate for your training, because a lot of people wanted to adventure a lot more than you thought was beneficial to your training,
or that would injure me.
It takes time to be a real advocate for yourself when it comes to owning your individualized plan and your goals and things like that. So just know that sometimes if you feel like you're meeting somebody at their middle that isn't necessarily maybe where you want to be, give yourself some grace. The process forward is never just one straight line. There's always going to be moments where you feel like you might not be doing something that is super beneficial to your training. I think, at least for me, who runs with Zoe all the time, especially on my long runs pretty frequently, knowing that when you're going easy, no matter where you are and what you're doing, you're always benefiting your training really helps.
Like, his easy effort is different than mine, and when we run together, he is going my easy effort because I am not going to budge on that.
Nor should you.
Right.
So that makes total sense. Anyways, I think, gosh, we've really covered a good
I just think saying no is a superpower, not just in training, but like in all life things. Ooh. If you can just be like, no, I don't want to, it doesn't work for me, I can't, I don't want to, and like don't justify it. Like, you can just say no to stuff.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
People will respect you for it. Like, if you don't want to do something, say no.
Set the boundaries.
If it doesn't work for your training, say no, this doesn't work for my training. Set boundaries. Just like throw no's up in the air.
You could have a whole conversation on why it's important to say no.
I love saying no. And it's something I work on all the time. It's very hard at work and it's very hard as a coach, but it's also like the only thing that allows you to truly say yes. Like, if you only ever say yes, then you're kind of never actually saying yes.
I like that. It's so true. Well, thank you guys. Hopefully we answered these questions for you guys in a way that was helpful or thought provoking. And if you have additional follow-up or you have some questions for next week, let us know. We're not really sure what topic we'll get into on Monday, but for Friday, a rapid fire session it's always helpful if you guys can send over your questions. So thanks so much. And we'll see you in the training logs.
Yeah. Say no to something this weekend.
Yeah. Advocate for yourselves this weekend.
I wonder what I'm going to say no to. I'm excited. I'm going to shut someone down hard today.
No. With love, though.
With love.
All right.
With hard love.
See you guys. Thank you. Thanks so much.